Italy is that country that changes scenery like turning a corner. In just a few hours, you leave snow-capped peaks and reach a crystal-clear sea that looks like glass. Today, I'm taking you from north to south through three simple, powerful lenses: cities, castles, and beaches. We'll decode why Venice works without cars, how fortresses in the Alps watched over passes and routes, and why Sardinia's blue waters and Sicily's cliffs look like a movie set. Along the way, there's Milan's elegance, Florence's poetry, the chaotic, delicious energy of Rome and Naples, the colorful cutouts of Cinque Terre, the drama of the Amalfi Coast, the white of Tropea, and Taormina's perfect window. This isn't a checklist. It's a mental map to help you understand how Italy's landscape creates history, flavor, and a way of life. Come with me. At every curve, a secret. And, in the end, you'll see Italy with the eyes of someone who belongs. Italy begins up high, where the mountains look like they were carved with a pocket knife. In the Dolomites, the Tre Cime di Lavaredo slash the sky with three precise strokes. The light shifts, the rock flares orange, and you understand why so many people climb just to watch the silence. Drop down a bit, and ancient glaciers turn into mirrors. Lake Como, Garda, Maggiore. At the water's edge, towns like Bellagio, Sirmione, and Stresa pose as if they've known they were photogenic since ancient Rome. In Sirmione, a castle dips its feet into the lake, reminding you that here, castles aren't just history, they're landscape. Turn left, and the Po Valley appears like an ocean of land. 1,000 fields, 1,000 irrigation canals, 1,000 mists. Cremona crafts violins that resonate in the cold. Ferrara and Mantua sketch horizons of towers that appear and disappear as the fog decides. Milan bridges the Alps and the plain, an urban heart pulsing with design and a fast tempo, yet still keeping the poetry of water along the Navili. It's a pragmatic, elegant north, where every valley opens onto another story, and there's almost always a castle watching the natural corridor where people and ideas pass. Head east, and the geography turns liquid. Venice isn't just a city, it's a brilliant geographic decision. A shallow lagoon that breathes with the tide. Islands speaking to each other by bridges. A logistics system that runs without cars, and with patience. Nearby, Chioggia and Comacchio remind you that life at water level isn't Venice's alone. And where the Adriatic meets limestone, Trieste appears with Miramare Castle hanging over the blue. A scene that seems to say, yes, you can live at the end of a wind called the Bora. If you're into world facts, note this. In a matter of hours, Italy takes you from snow to salty breeze, from peaks to plain, like an open-air microclimate lab. That's not just beautiful. It explains food, accent, clothing, and even daily schedules. Head down through the center, and the country's backbone reveals itself. The Apennines, a range that opens and closes valleys, separates dialects, and invents recipes. In Abruzzo, the Gran Sasso sketches broad summits, and along the coast, the Trabocchi appear, fishing platforms that look like machines built to catch the horizon. Farther north, Marche cuts the sea with the cliffs of Mount Conero. Cirolo and Numana are two perfect frames of limestone and turquoise water. In Lazio, Mount Circeo rises out of nowhere as if it were a character. Sperlonga tumbles down white steps to a beach that needs no filter. And when the wind shifts, it carries stories along the Tiber and the Arno, rivers that give Rome and Florence their sense of direction. Two cities born in the most Italian way possible, by uniting stone, water, and perspective. Tuscany draws you inward with hills that feel like breathing. Val d'Orcia, Pienza, San Quirico. Rows of cypresses show the way as if they were halves of a page. Turn toward the sea and the Maremma is rougher. Pine forests, lagoons, and wide beaches where the wind sets the rules. In the Tuscan archipelago, Elba blends Napoleon with clear waters, an island that seems carved for old maps and long dives. We've reached the south, where Italy takes off the suit and slips into linen. The Amalfi Coast drops in dramatic curves, Positano and Amalfi glued to the rock, Ravello suspended with gardens floating over the Tyrrhenian. Naples is energy in liquid form, with Vesuvius in the background reminding you that geography here is gorgeous and alive. Sometimes a little too hot. Cross the strait and Calabria appears with Tropea's bright white and the poetry of Scylla, a village that presses its forehead to the sea. In Puglia, the shoreline plays at being a European Caribbean. Polignano a Mare carved into cliffs, the sea caves of Otranto, and the shallow beaches of the Salento, Pescaluce, and Punta Prosciutto, where the water turns crystal clear and your body slows down on instinct. Now, the islands. Sardinia is a catalog of impossible blues. The Costa Smeralda with powder-fine sand, La Maddalena hopping from cove to cove, Cala Golorizze like a cathedral of pale stone. Sicily is its own world, Etna sketching smoke in the sky, Taormina opening a theater to the sea, and the Scala dei Turchi reading like a geology book at the water's edge. Scattered around, the Aeolian Islands, hello Stromboli, the Egadian Islands, and smaller isles dot the nautical chart for those who like to chase horizons. Another world fact to keep: Italy has thousands of kilometers of coastline when you add peninsula and islands, a marathon of gulfs, coves, and straits that change moods with the wind. That sheer amount of shoreline explains why Italian life loves light, outdoor tables, and just one more swim before heading home. Amid all this, you find cities that stitch geography into everyday life. Rome, with the Tiber and 7 hills that turn any walk into a lesson in perspective. Florence, folded by the Arno and ringed by hills that light up its domes at dusk. Verona, which uses the Adige River as a U-shaped stage. Genoa, squeezed between mountain and sea, turning every alley into a surprise. Bari and Lecce, in the south, where pale stone and sunlight teach you that the Mediterranean can be read on the surface of the architecture. And of course, Venice, always Venice, reminding you that a city can float. When you look at Italy this way, cities, castles, and beaches stitched by the same geography, the map becomes history in motion. Mountains filter winds, winds shape clouds, clouds decide harvests, harvests become food, and food becomes culture. And you realize it's not a country to see, it's a country to understand as you breathe. The thread of Italian history is woven from 3 strands that cross constantly. Cities that become ideas, castles that become frontiers, and coastlines that become routes. It starts in the north, when Venice and Genoa turned the sea into a road and accounting into a weapon. The former, mistress of the Adriatic, invented logistics that felt like magic. Standardized parts, ships rolling out of the arsenal like an assembly line, diplomacy as business. The latter, facing the Tyrrhenian, made banks its invisible fleet, financing voyages and kingdoms. And in the valleys, Alpine castles, Forte di Bard, Feni, Isogne, Buonconsiglio, controlled mountain choke points like medieval toll booths. Whoever commanded the view commanded the story. Around the Great Lakes, geography underwrote both romantic and military history. Sirmione, with its castle set in the water, is an elegant reminder that defense could be beautiful. Verona used the Adige as a liquid wall. Bergamo Alta, perched on the hills, kept watch for centuries. In Trieste, at the meeting point of worlds, Miramare Castle still seems to wait for a ship that never arrives. A memory of empires and farewells. Head down to the center and Rome's ancient road network still sets the routes. Via Appia, Aurelia, Flaminia, names carved in stone that became roads still used today. Rome was an empire, then a papacy, and each layer remained, stacked like a lasagna of centuries. Castel Sant'Angelo began as a Roman mausoleum and became a papal fortress. Ostia Antica, a port that silted up, still teaches how the sea can come and go, and take the roots of power with it. In Tuscany, the city-states turned rivalry into a factory of art. Florence raised domes to compete with the sky. Siena sharpened its walls and turned Piazza del Campo into its room for war and celebration. Pisa became an involuntary symbol of gravity with its leaning tower. But the message is old. Ports prosper, and when the river shifts, fortune shifts with it. And on hilltops, Monteriggioni and other roches surrounded by vineyards are 360-degree maps of what it meant to watch the roads before highway patrols. In Abruzzo, Rocca Calascio seems to float. It's the kind of fortress that proves landscape is strategy too. In Lazio, Castello Orsini Odescalchi in Bracciano once commanded lake routes and today commands movie-worthy weddings. The use changes, the symbol remains. Cesenatico received a harbor canal drawn with Renaissance intelligence, a palm-sized port city where every boat is a chapter of the economy. And when the map bends south, the story changes languages, sometimes literally. Sicily was a laboratory of encounters. Arabs who brought science and water, Byzantines who brought gold and icons, Normans who brought stone and crowns, Swabians who brought mathematics and form. The Cathedral of Monreale shimmers with mosaics that tell the world in gold. Castello Maniace in Syracuse guards the harbor like a stone fist. In Erice, a castle kisses clouds and seas at the same time. In Puglia, Castel del Monte is an octagon that looks like it was drawn with a cosmic ruler. No one agrees on its purpose, and perhaps that's the point, to ask questions. In Naples, Castel dell'Ovo and Castel Nuovo, the Moschio Angioino, narrate kingdoms, invasions, and renaissances along a bay that bubbles like the city itself. On Ischia, the Aragonese castle is a town atop rock, crossed by a bridge that feels like a bridge to another era. In Calabria, La Castella rises from the clear sea. When the water is transparent, the past doesn't need a museum. The political thread stitching all this together took a new stitch in the 19th century with the Risorgimento, the unification. Rails, telegraphs, and armies sewed together a north and a south that had long eyed each other from afar. Turin and Milan led industry and the press. Rome became the center of gravity. The South balanced tradition with the departure of people, many people seeking their fortunes abroad. Between one shock and the next, Italy learned to translate its differences, which is why it remains a mosaic. Each piece shines by contrast. And here are two fun facts in history we love because they explain more than they seem. First, the term arsenal, which we now use for depots and military factories, comes from the Arabic Dar al-Sana'a, house of industry/craft, carried into the Mediterranean through centuries of exchange, proof that the sea separates those who don't sail. For those who do, it unites. Second, the word bankruptcy smells of the public square. When a money changer failed, his physical bench, the banco, was literally broken. Banca rota. Cities inventing metaphors that become law. In the end, Italian history works like Roman roads, direct, stubborn, and full of scenery along the way. Cities are born where routes cross. Castles rise where the view commands. Beaches turn into town squares when the wind calms. Understanding this chain, geography becoming power, power becoming culture, is what turns travel into reading. And when you read Italy, it starts telling you secrets you won't find in the brochure. Why some cities feel inevitable. Why certain castles never seem to age. Why that curve of coastline gives you the strange feeling of déjà vu, as if you were returning to a place you've somehow already been. Italian culture doesn't ask permission. It takes you by the hand. In the north, the day starts with a short coffee, no fuss, no sugar, and ends with the aperitivo that turns sidewalks into living rooms. In Milan, you realize design isn't a display window, it's a way of thinking. In Venice, you discover the Baccaro, the tiny snack bar where conversation flows like a canal. Around the lakes, Towns like Bellagio and Verona show that romance here is everyday life. Street musicians, flowered balconies, dinners that linger without hurry. And up high, the Alpine refugi teach mountain etiquette. Eat together, share the table, toast the sunset, because the view is culture too. In central Italy, life becomes a calendar. Florence breathes workshops, leather, marbled paper, goldsmithing. The past isn't in the museum, it's at the artisan's stall where they call you by name. Siena organizes itself into contrade, neighborhoods that compete in the palio. Flags, anthems, rivalries, and hugs. Ultimately, it's a lesson in belonging. Rome teaches something else: coexistence. Roman ruins become park benches. Churches rise over ancient temples, and you cross a century at every corner. On the coast, towns like Cesenatico remind you that a well-designed canal becomes a living room. Fish drying in the sun, colorful sailboats, casual conversation. And when evening falls, the passeggiata begins. Everyone goes out to walk, hand in hand or alone, to tell their body the day was good. Down below, in the Southern Islands, the culture changes tone, volume, and seasoning. Naples conducts the liturgy of pizza like a mass. Elastic dough, a wood-fired oven, loud conversation. Sicily turns into dessert with cannoli and granita. Palermo teaches that the marketplace is theater. Taormina opens a stage with the sea as its audience. In Puglia, Lecce is Baroque even in the shade, and the Salento dances the taranta until dawn, percussion that feels like the Mediterranean's heartbeat. In Calabria, villages like Scilla press their houses to the water. You hear the chatter from the windows the way you hear the sea. In Sardinia, the Costa Smeralda proves that luxury can be a well-chosen silence. Fine sand, perfect water, the pause as a virtue. Between cities, castles, and beaches, small rituals make the country fit in your pocket. Eating while standing at the counter, ordering just one more coffee, debating soccer as if it were philosophy. And the language? Here's a world fact that changes how you read the map. Italy is officially multilingual in regions like South Tyrol, German Italian, the Aosta Valley, French Italian, and stretches of Trieste, Slovenian. Add Ladine in the Dolomites and Sardinian in Sardinia. The result? Bilingual signs, schools with 2 curricula, newscasts that switch languages, diversity that isn't folklore. It's everyday policy. Now, 2 pit stops worthy of a bar table. First, a delicious fun fact in history. The name cappuccino comes from the brown of the Capuchin monk's habit. The foam and coffee make the same color as the hood. It's not a rule carved in stone, but many people in central southern Italy avoid cappuccino after 11 a.m. For them, milk is a morning thing. Second, another fun fact in history that makes food lovers proud. The art of the Neapolitan pizzaiolo has been recognized as intangible cultural heritage. More than a recipe, it's gesture, tradition, community. The castles have also become cultural stages. Bracciano, in Lazio, now hosts weddings and concerts. Roccacalascio, in Abruzzo, has become a movie set. Castel del Monte, in Puglia, continues to spark debate and inspires artists and photographers as if it were a 3D enigma. As for the beaches, they're popular theater. On Ferragosto, the coast is packed. Families set up camp with beach umbrellas. The fruit vendor becomes a character, and small talk with the neighbor on the sand turns into a friendship by sunset. That's when the whole country seems to share the same heartbeat. The takeaway is simple. Here, cities are classrooms, castles are open books, and beaches are the most beautiful recess in the world. You don't need to memorize dates to feel Italy. You need to listen. The barista who remembers your face, the artisan who shows you the perfect flaw, the nana who corrects your pasta doneness, the guide who whispers a legend.
It's in this chorus of voices that the country reveals itself. And when you go home, you take something that doesn't fit in your suitcase. The certainty that beauty, here, is only the front door. The secret lies in how people use that beauty every day. From the Alpine wall to Sicily's volcanic glow, Italy shows that one country can be many at once. Cities that teach, Rome, Florence, Naples, Venice. Castles that watch over the roads, Bard, Venice, Bracciano, Castel del Monte. And beaches that slow the clock, Cinque Terre, Amalfi, Tropea, Sardinia, Sicily. When you put these pieces together, you don't just get an itinerary, you gain a lens. You understand why the food changes with each valley, why the accents dance with the terrain, why history chose certain ports and certain hills. If anything is clear, it's this. Italy isn't for box checking, it's for reading. And when you read it, it gives you a sense of belonging. Now tell me, which city swept you away? Which castle called you by name? And which beach would you put on day one of your route? Pick the next destination. I'm going with you.
Italy is an atlas that took a deep breath and rose into relief. When you cross the country slowly, you realize every fold of the land creates a way of life. The mountain that teaches silence, the lake that slows your gaze, the cliff that forces you to walk more carefully, the beach that redefines what color is. This chapter invites you to see Italy through the skin, wind, light, scents, starting with the peaks that sketch the north and drifting, unhurried, down to the volcanoes that warm the south. It isn't a list, it's a thread of places that speak to each other. If any description sparks a desire, save it the way you'd bookmark a favorite paragraph. I'll start in the Alps and the Dolomites, where stone becomes natural architecture. The Tre Cime di Lavaredo are the gateway, 3 towers that change color over the course of the day, from cool gray to almost impossible orange at sunset. Beside them, the Alpe di Siusi, Sizer Alm Plateau opens an endless lawn at the foot of rock walls. It's the kind of landscape you remember for its silence. In Seceda, the ridgelines look like blades. One overlook is enough to understand why so many people climb up just to feel the wind. And the lakes? Lake Breas is an emerald green mirror ringed by firs, with wooden boats that seem drawn by a patient painter. Lake Carezza shifts tone with the sky. Lake Serapis is a glass of pale blue milk hidden after a hike. And Lake Rezia keeps the bell tower rising from the water, a reminder that landscapes tell stories of loss, too. The valleys open, and the world changes scale. In the Aosta Valley, Gran Paradiso, Italy's first national park, protects ibex and glaciers, trails and alpine meadows that look neatly combed. On clear days, Mont Blanc, Monte Bianco, appears like a white wall behind Courmayeur. It feels as if the sky sits closer. To the east, the Stelvio Pass draws 48 switchbacks up to the crest. Driving there is like sketching in the air. In Piedmont, Monviso stands solitary, and farther down, the rolling hills of the Longa undulate with vineyards as far as the eye can see. Autumn here is a masterclass in color. Lake Orta is small and intimate. The island of San Giulio looks like a punctuation mark resting in the middle of the text. As you reach the Great Lakes, the air changes its scent. Lake Como unites dramatic mountains and elegant gardens. The balconies of Varenna and Bellagio lean over the water like audiences. Lake Garda is plural. At the northern tip, winds for sailing and rock walls that recall a fjord. Farther south, plains of olive groves, beaches, and Sirmione's castle with its feet in the water. Lake Maggiore scatters garden islands. Isola Bella is a dream in green and stone. It's striking how, here, nature and human work interlace without apology. Old villages become the frame, and the frame elevates the landscape. Turn slowly toward Veneto and Friuli Venezia Giulia. The Dolomiti Bellunesi hide less obvious valleys, with milky rivers and deep forests. The Prosecco Hills, Valdobbiadene, are an embroidery of vines, green waves that gleam on foggy mornings. In Trieste, the Carso is a lesson in limestone, a dry plateau, caves, and long views of the Adriatic. Miramare Castle, suspended over the sea, is a reminder that the light in Italy's northeast has a particular blue, part Adriatic, part Balkan. In this corner of the map, the Bora wind wakes you up and forces you to pay attention to what your body feels. Walk along Liguria and you discover how mountains, when they fall into the sea, invent tiered villages. The Cinque Terre, Rio Maggiore, Manarola, Corniglia, Vernazza, Monterosso, form a sequence of colors you understand best from the trail skirting the vineyards. Portofino is a curved embrace of houses. Porto Venere blends a church atop rock with a sea grotto. What's interesting here is noticing how your body changes pace. Nothing is flat, and that's exactly what makes every overlook earned. On the western coast, Finale Ligure reveals limestone cliffs and trails the locals know by heart. Italy always has local paths for those who ask respectfully. Turn inland and follow the spine of the Apennines. In the Parco Nazionale dei Monti Sibillini, the fields of Castelluccio di Norcia bloom like a flag. Lentils turn into carpets of color at the start of summer. In Abruzzo, the Gran Sasso Massif and the plain of Campo Imperatore recall high plateaus from another continent. The light here is clear, almost high Alpine. The range drops and meets the sea at the Trabocchi, wooden fishing platforms that make the horizon look like a technical drawing. Utility and poetry in the same structure. In Umbria, the Valnerina is a sequence of green gorges, and the Cascata della Marmore tumbles in steps, a Roman work that became a natural spectacle. Lake Trasimeno is shallow and contemplative. The sunset moves slowly, as if teaching patience. In Tuscany, the landscape feels like soft music. The Val d'Orcia arranges hills into visual motifs, cypresses, vineyards, pairs of stone houses. The Crete Senesi are another tone, pale undulations, almost lunar. If you want warm water and open sky, the Cascate del Mulino, Saturnia, let steam dance over travertine, geology turned into rest. On the coast, the Maremma mixes pine forests and wild beaches. Monte Argentario juts out like a stone ship, tying back to the mainland by tongues of sand. In the Tuscan archipelago, Elba offers slopes that dive into green-blue water, and Giglio reminds you that sometimes Italy speaks in a low voice. The Amalfi Coast needs no introduction, but it asks for nuance. Positano is almost too photogenic to be real. Amalfi is history, and Ravello is height, gardens like balconies over the world. Continue along the Cilento coast and the scene opens up. Polinoro, Marina di Camerata, sea caves, and long beaches that are less frenetic. Behind it all, Vesuvius keeps silence and memory. In the Campi Flegrei, volcanic lakes remind you that the ground breathes. And if you like to walk, the Gole del Alcantara in Sicily reveal basalt columns cut by cold water. One of those places that blends science with refreshment. Speaking of Sicily, this is where the Mediterranean flips the chapter. The Riserva dello Zingaro is a coastal trail with beaches framed by cliffs and aromatic maquis. San Vito lo Capo delivers pale sand with water that looks edited. To the west, the salt pans of Trapani and Marsala mirror pink skies at sunset. On windy days, the mills turn and you swear you've gone back in time. Etna is the hot heart of the island, with trails across lunar terrain and breathtaking views. In the Aeolians, Stromboli spits fire on the regular, and seeing the Sciara del Fuoco at night is almost religious. Favignana, in the Agati, has Cala Rosa, where sculpted rock and shallow water make a natural pool. On Pantelleria, the Specchio di Venere is a volcanic lake that gives the sky back, and gives back the mood of anyone who goes in. Sardinia is a treatise on blues. In the north, the La Maddalena archipelago is a maze of coves that beg for a slow boat. Cala Caticcio, on Caprera, looks like a Caribbean carved into granite. On the Costa Smeralda, fine sand and crystal water form the classic palette, but the island's east holds the most dramatic relief. The Gulf of Orizay with Cala Luna, Cala Mariolu, Cala Galaritse,
cathedrals of white stone facing a liquid sea. Inland, the Sugoropu Canyon splits the rock into towering walls, the mountains showing another face. On the west coast, the Piscinas Dunes on the Costa Verde run all the way to the sea, a reminder that Italy has desert too. And in the north, La Pelosa, Stintino, sketches a shallow lagoon in a shade of blue that defies description.
Puglia is an entire coastline in a state of grace. The Gargano promontory shelters the Foresta Umbra, cool shade before the blue. Vieste raises its white rock before the sea, and the Pizzo Muno monolith tells legends of love and jealousy. Down in the Salento, Polignano a Mare is cliff, balcony, and poetry. The Grotta della Poesia in Rocca Vecchia is a natural pool that earns its name. The beaches of Pescaluce and Punta Prosciutto refine the sand until it turns to powder. The Torre Guasetto Reserve shows that beauty and preservation go hand in hand. And Lecce lets the Baroque play with the sun. Architecture is landscape too when the light joins in. Between one coast and the other, the Parco del Pollino, Basilicata, Calabria, stretches ridges and valleys scented with pine, protecting the Pino Loricato, a tree that looks like sculpture. In the Dolomiti Lucani, villages like Castelmezzano and Pietrapertosa cling to sharp rocks. At night, their lit windows turn into constellations. In Calabria, the Costa degli Dei lives up to its name in Tropea and Capo Vaticano. The sea here has the density of a dream. Inland, the Silla is plateau, lakes, and woods. Farther south, the Aspromonte drops abruptly into the Costa Viola, and Silla's sunset always feels like the first one. In Lazio, Mount Circeo lifts dunes and lagoons before a Tyrrhenian that learns to be calm. Sperlonga descends in whites toward a sheltered cove. Farther north, the Maremma, already mentioned, insists on pine forests and wide beaches. Heading up the Adriatic, Monte Canero carves the Marche coast with pebble beaches and trails under pines, while the Grotte di Frassasi sculpt underground halls that feel like inverted cathedrals. And at the far northern end of the Adriatic, the Po Delta is a maze of channels and low islands with herons and flamingos, a watery silence that clears the mind. Here's a world fact worth noting. Italy holds everything from active glaciers to Mediterranean dunes, from alpine environments to Sardinian semi-arid. Rare biogeographic diversity in such a compact territory. If you like to gaze at the horizon with your feet on solid ground, there are roads and trails that turn into experiences. The Strada della Cinquantadue Gallerie on Monte Pasubio tunnels through the mountain, revealing wartime engineering turned into a historic hike. Strada della Fora on Lake Garda climbs gorges with cinematic curves. Farther south, hiking the Via degli Dei between Bologna and Florence means crossing the Apennines like modern Romans. In Sicily, a clear day ascent of Etna gives you the whole island as a bonus. In the Val d'Orcia, pedaling the Strade Bianche is the art of rhythm. In Sardinia, kayaking the Gulf of Orozay is like sketching the coastline with your own hands. And when thirst kicks in, remember the landscape drinks too. The Lang and Monferrato, Piedmont, Por Nebbiolo and Fog. Valpolicella, Veneto, brings hills that smell of Amarone. Trentino Alto Adige offers apple valleys and mountain wines. Tuscany alternates Chianti, Brunello, and Vino Nobile with horizons of cypresses. In the south, Etna turns out mineral-driven wines. Salento pours sun-soaked reds, and Sardinia presents Vermentino with a whiff of sea spray. This isn't pedantic enology, it's geography in a glass. Fun facts in history. Many of the terraces and dry stone walls that hold up vineyards are centuries-old techniques. Living heritage spread across slopes that, without them, would slide with every heavy rain. Perhaps the most beautiful thing is noticing how Italy lets itself be crossed. In Matera, Basilicata, stone becomes city. The Sassi are inhabited canyons, and sunrise there is instructive. Light sketches facades, and each house turns golden for a second. In Civita di Bagnoregio, Lazio, a tough plateau wavers with time, and the village seems to float. It's a lesson in erosion and resilience. In Taormina, the Greek theater opens windows to Etna and the sea, reminding you that here, culture and nature were never separate. And in the Parco Nazionale di Abruzzo, Lazio e Molise, if you're lucky, running into a deer makes you understand the word presence. In the end, Italy gives you a simple lesson. Landscape isn't a backdrop, it's a character. The Alps temper winds and give flavor to the water. The Apennines divide accents and recipes. The coasts separate and connect depending on the boat. The volcanoes remind you the ground has a pulse. You don't need to see everything. You need to feel a few places completely. The rest, curiously, falls into place. And when someone asks what struck you most, you may find it wasn't a point on the map, but the instant. The silence before the flare on Stromboli, the salty smell at Conero, the pleasant chill in Braia's shade, the warm sand at Cala Mariolu, the light breeze on the hills of Pienza. That's where Italy stops being a trip and becomes part of you.